Hi, Zandy. You know, if you're a longtime listener of the People and Projects podcast, you may recall that every once in a while we have a type of episode that we call In the Trenches. It's an interview with someone who's actively working in a project leadership role, allowing us to benefit from the lessons that they've been learning over the years. Well, I'm glad to welcome our guest today, Nigel Creaser from the United Kingdom. Nigel's not only an active project professional, he's also an author and host of the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast. Nigel and I interact enough online that we agreed it'd be fun to have each other on our podcasts. And so in today's discussion, Nigel will share some insights from his book, Project Manager Productivity Hacks. And he'll share some lessons he's learned while managing projects and careers. It's a discussion with a guy I've grown to admire over the years. Hey, quick note, you know how important it is to develop your ability to lead and deliver. That's why you're listening today. Well, you know, too often students don't learn these lessons until they're thrown into it early years of their career. If you know a high school or college-age student and want to invest in them, check out our program entitled Getting Stuff Done, Project Management for Students. They can learn how to reduce their stress and thrive with their schooling now, and you'll be giving them a head start to more confidently lead and deliver when they launch their career later on. Learn more and get a copy for them at peopleandprojectspodcast.com/gettingstuffdone. Thanks. Let's jump into today's discussion with Nigel about his book, Project Manager Productivity Hacks. Hey, Nigel, thanks for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Thanks, Andy. It's a bit of a, I'd say a bit of a imposter syndrome conversation going on here. When I started off the podcast, there was yourself, there's a few others that are running podcasts, and I kind of like it. I'd love to get myself to be up to that level and kind of being on the shows. Yeah.
Oh, man.
It takes a while sometimes to ask to be on things as well.
Oh, man. We've been trying. I feel like you and I have been trying for about a year and a half to make this happen. So yeah. I'm just so glad we actually got it to happen. And I know from listening to your Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast that you like to learn more about your guest backstory, you know. So let's talk about yours. You know, I don't really know your backstory that well. So how do you describe your current role and what was your path to get there?
Well, I'm currently working for a big system integrator organization on an account for a government organization. So I've been actually just gone past my 19 years in that particular account with that company, and wow. Been very fortunate with it's a large account that I've managed to go around a lot of different technologies, a lot of different customer groups and things like that. So from data warehousing to networking to infrastructure to desktops to I was talking to someone yesterday. There's one area that I think I haven't been in yet that I need to probably experience, and then I'll be able to tick off all of them, like a bingo dabber.
Right.
So that's what I'm doing. And the role it varies depending on the need. Really, it'll be managing projects, or it will be managing teams of project managers in a portfolio scenario or in a program scenario. It varies in the different assignments that I have to do at different times. So
that's cool.
I've been very fortunate there to have quite a varied, it feels like a new job sometimes every time you go into a new assignment.
Yeah.
Like a lot of us do with project management, I suppose it can be like that. But that's my current role.
Yeah.
Before that I used to describe myself as a failed accountant. A proudly failed accountant,
right.
Which I'm not dissing accountancy. It's the fact that I failed to get through the exams, but that didn't make me change career. I got opportunity to jump into an IT career as a sort of SME from the finance team when I worked for Barclays Bank, and found that because I understood the database, multi-dimensional databases and stuff like that, and got asked to be the IT lead on that sort of thing, understanding it. And then somebody at some point said, do you want to just run this bit of project? And so I said, yeah, all right, I'll do that. And ended up doing some year 2000 stuff, which was quite interesting throw in an isolated environment. So we brought in our disaster recovery environment, set up the systems in there and rolled the dates forward to see what happens with the systems in the year 2000. So that was quite a big project there. And then unfortunately got made redundant there and had a chance, but fortunately, because it was Oracle based, I got a chance to work for Oracle So I worked with Oracle for about 4 years, implementing, well, varying things from CRM at local governments to working on payroll migrations, working on data warehousing, massive matching projects for egg and people like that. So been fortunate to have quite a varied number of projects and career.
I love it. You know, it's so rare to run into somebody who right out of school said, I want to be a project manager. They want to be this. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, you're good at that. Would you do this? And it's just the path you see over and over and over, isn't it?
Yeah. It's funny, actually. I've always had this kind of thing of growing up. My dad was a kind of a manager. He's ex-army, and he went to work in a suit. And I think somewhere along my brain, I wanted to go to work in a suit and a tie, somewhere in the back of my head. So as a kid, I wanted to go to banking. This is early 80s, so you can imagine. Back then, the sort of some of the role project management wasn't even. Well, although when you consider the fact that PMI had been around since '69, from when I was born. Not heard in the 80s, I hadn't heard of it, but I was I think that welded me to the view of I wanted to wear a jacket and tie for some reason. And I had it in my brain that I'd go down to do some in banking, do something at Lloyd's Bank, at Lloyd's of London or the Stock Exchange. That was where my brain was. And funny, when you walk out of school, I was 16 and one of the guys I knew was doing accountancy. I was doing a business studies course, and they were going to go and do accountancy specific. And I remember talking to him saying, what the hell would you want to do that for? That's boring. And then in the 2 years that I did my business, well, you had to do a bit of accountancy, and then I moved into accountancy. It's funny how your prejudices to different careers when you're young. Until you know
you only know what you know, right? And so that's really I love hearing those sorts of stories. And you know, I almost regardless of what you do, there's so many things from your book that apply to people. Like, for example, in your book, Project Management Productivity Hacks, you talk about how interruptions are something we need to manage. So someone who's an accountant needs to worry about that. But what are some of your biggest interruptions and some of your personal favorite ways to minimize them?
It's quite interesting because I'm quite flaky, is the way I describe myself. I don't know if you know the DISC profile, which it's kind of a very similar scale, and your listeners may or may not know it. It's kind of, you've got the more outgoing and more people-focused people, and I fit into that bunch. Sometimes in a little quieter area. Sometimes I can be a bit stroppy as well and be a bit more forceful, but I tend to, it's about me. I like to have that enough about me. Tell me what you think about me kind of thing. So that's my wife describes.
Makes you a good podcast host that way, actually.
In theory, yeah. As long as I shut up and listen, which is I've managed to do. So I do like to hear the sound of my own voice, which means today's great. But yeah, so I sit in that my character type. So I'm easily distracted. I love the new thing. I love to learn something new. I don't necessarily like to master. I like to get things to a certain level, and certain things I've done, I've got there. But I do have a passion for things that are new. If it's new to me, I quite, that's cool, for no reason. You can't see, but I have a thing I picked up by watching YouTube just before Christmas about building Scarbox guitars, and suddenly went down a rabbit hole of that. For the last 3 months, been playing around making bits of stuff like that. So distractions for me are natural. So and part of the reason that off the back of the book and some of these things is a lot of the things that I've got in the book are because I know what I'm like, because I know I need to manage myself and I need to refresh that management techniques and that tool. So the one that the most important one is email for me. It's changing because I've noticed that in the last since lockdown, and certainly beyond that as well, that email is becoming less the beast that it used to be, and instant messaging is becoming the beast that kind of you get back to the office and I've got nearly as many instant messages to catch up on as I've got emails, and in different focus on those from there. But the one thing I did years and years ago, and it was one of the things that drove, is that, and I think when emails appear, it's easy to dive into them and and use emails to decide what you're going to do for the rest of the day. And there's another podcast called Manager Tools. A lot of these ideas are kind of how I've applied some of the ideas that those guys have talked about. Fantastic guys from guys in the States, Mark Hortzman and Mike Kazan, who I learned so much, and they are absolute nerds on this, being a better manager, being a better employee sort of thing, and learned so much from them. And scheduling my work and scheduling emails is an amazing thing, because then if I treat my what am I going to do today as being what's in my calendar, that means you're more likely to get into flow, you're more likely to get more productive, etc., and get the things done that are important to your objectives. It's easy to get diverted from an email. Am I good at it? No, I need to be better at it. Should I be looking at my emails 3 times a day? Yes. Do I look at it more than 3 times a day? Yes. But I know what I'm trying to do with those things, and I think I think I say it in the book somewhere, is productivity isn't about winning. It's not like a sport. You can't get the score on the board where your number of touchdowns or number of goals or number of baskets or whatever, or number of strikes. It's more like yoga in that you can always be a bit more stretched. You can always be more flexible. Now, there probably is a limit, but there's very few people who ever reach that limit. And quite often there'll be something that means you've gone back. So you've sat on a train for 3 days, traveling different places. You're going to have gone back a little bit on yourself. And I see it that way as well. Is sometimes we want this nirvana of perfection, and it's not there. It's about being a little bit better than you were yesterday, a little bit better than the week before. Oh, when I fell off the truck, it doesn't matter. I'll get back on it. And it's a constant get on doing it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that metaphor. I'm not a very flexible person by physically, and so I'm trying actually yoga this year. And I feel like I'm easily the worst person in the class, but I'm better than I was a couple months ago. Yeah, and so I like your metaphor of we'll never be perfect at this sort of thing. But like I seem to recall in the book, you talk about the obvious stuff like do not disturb and. When it comes to notifications, but you also, I think, maybe use rules in email more than what some people do. Can you think of a rule that you use that has helped you when it comes to email?
Yeah, and again, this is kind of one of the triggers for thinking about writing this. Really is and again, it came off the back of some of the stuff that the guys in Manager Tools was around. Yeah, you get copied emails. Less of a problem now compared to what it was, but we used to get lots of copied emails. Yeah. So it's the CC carbon copy, as it used to be, where people would print off forms in triplicate and send them to all the different departments before email. And then as we got email, everybody just copies in someone else just in case, copies in someone else there. And 9 times out of 10, you don't need to read it. So why read it? You don't, and certainly you don't need to read it immediately. Yeah. So what I did is set up a rule that if a rule comes in and I'm in the copied, it moves it to a separate part of my inbox. Actually, only until I spoke to someone a couple of years ago on my podcast did I turn it it marks it as read now. So I don't have 2 boxes, one that's growing and growing and growing with a big number on it, causing anxiety. I started doing that. Nervousness to start off with. Got rid of a load of emails. I left it on for a day and I had a look in the evening. And looking in the evening was amazing because there was a list of about 20 emails with all the same topic. And I'm like, oh no, what's happened? My team were talking to each other, different thing. What's happening? So I thought I'll look at the last one and it said, great, all sorted. Thanks for all your help. Something like that. Delete. And I looked and I went, let me have a look. Let me see what this was. Yeah. Essentially, a question got asked about something that I know that if I'd seen it, I'd have got involved. Right. Now, I wouldn't have necessarily been the right person to get involved, but I would have been part of the team trying to coordinate. The team did it themselves. I was not the critical part of that thing, and it got done. And I was convinced from there that move it. Now, there's a risk, obviously. If my boss copies me and says, do this by Tuesday, and I'm in the copy, I won't see it. But actually, if I've got a inbox full of 400 emails, and they copy me on an email asking me to do something, and there's loads of garbage in that email, there's a chance I won't see it either. Because you just we all do it, don't we? Yeah. there's a little presentation I pulled together that I didn't get to do actually to my team, but was around the fact that deciding which email to read in Outlook is diabolical because you have no data.
Right.
All the data you have is ineffectual. When did it come in? Well, that doesn't mean it's more urgent. Who's it from? Well, your boss telling you that somebody's nicked the teaspoons or someone isn't washing up the teaspoons isn't critical. So you can't use just who it's from. The title is great, except that people then start other conversations off the back of the title, the subject of the email, that aren't related to that, and they don't change the subject.
That's true. Yeah.
Is there an attachment? You start looking at all the data points in that Outlook view, and you go, well, none of that is any use on decision-making at all. So you have to open each one. Mm-hmm. Now, I suppose the thing for that is essentially these rules are AI. They're a kind of AI. And so I use CCs to start off with, and I've developed that on. So I use things like, if I've got meetings that are there, I have a separate place for meetings. I don't need to deal with a meeting invite straight away. Now, if it's a cancellation, maybe different, or if it's a move or someone suddenly. But then again, if someone just sends you an email updating the meeting saying it's in 2 minutes and you don't see that, if you've got lots of emails, you wouldn't see it anyway.
That's a good point.
It's look at all of the emails, look at the content you get, and decide when and what to do it. The other one I find is like when you're doing approvals of either whether it's invoices or whether it's timesheets or expenses. Yeah, the systems you go into aren't systems you use every day. And if you go into it 5 times a day because you've got 5 emails on it, the logging into it, the remembering what to do, it's not efficient. You wait until the end of the day or the end of the week and have an hour in your diary saying, I'm doing that, gather those through your tool, your rules, and then you go, right, bang, straight in there, done. And these are the micro savings in some ways.
Yeah, but they add up. It's like a compounded interest, right? It's like the benefit of doing that. Yeah. I've started using the like the snooze feature or the archive feature, which they've probably been around for a long time, Nigel, but I just wasn't using them. But it just gets it out of my face. It's
the one that goes through and looks at. Hang on, here's the topic. Here's the latest one. It's got everything you need. Get rid of the rest. So
right.
It. Yeah, I'd not noticed that one until probably 18 months ago. Someone pointed that out to me. But I suppose with me doing the stuff I do, I find that less, for me, less of a problem having those threads in there anyway. Yeah. I use the quick actions to file stuff as well, but I tend to trying to get away from that because with the search capability within the tools in these days, the filing of it, but then I don't drag it into multiple different. I've just got one button that goes right. That project, staff, personal, so a very high level, quick one. So just a little bit of OCD cleanup stuff that I've got as well.
No, I like it. You know, you talk in your book about mobile devices, and I think we'd all have to agree they're a blessing and a curse, right? And so, what are some ways that you use your mobile device to improve your productivity?
So it's interesting because I've got less in. I live on my phone. And my phone runs. When I'm not working, it runs my life outside of it. I'll use an app. I'll do my podcast posting. I'll do communication using LinkedIn. All that. That's the tools. That's the tool I use. Though I spend a lot of time away from it, it is the tool I use. So I was talking to my sister-in-law last night, and the fact that it's behind me, plugged in most of the time. If I'm out and about, it's mobile. It's with me. When I'm in the house, if I'm sat in the living room, unless we think, oh, who's that on IMDb? Let's see IMDb, have a look, who's that one there? It's still in here. It doesn't go, and the thing is the phone's on mute most of the time. And I've got to do a little bit of an audit because gradually I've got new apps that have said, can I have notifications? I thought, oh, that'll be useful because there'll be something specific. And then they've got loads of garbage that's popping up on the screen that then you have to deal with. And interestingly, you get an email from the same app telling you the same info that then you have to deal with. And then when you go into the app, there's a little notification still there with this little red dot on there telling you you've got something. You look at it and go, well, I just read that. So you're dealing with the same data multiple times. But the fundamental one for me is turn the bloody thing off.
Yeah.
The notifications, just put it on mute and turn all the notifications off that you can.
Yeah.
Because those micro distractions, there was a study, though it was a bit, I'm not sure if the way they judged it or the way it's been used, or certainly on the internet, saying that something like 20 minutes for you to get back into flow when you get disturbed. Yeah. So if my phone was on now and it beeps, my brain immediately goes, what's that? Who's that? So I'm distracted from this conversation with you.
Yeah.
And that means I'm not being the best me when I'm talking to you. Yeah. And that's kind of where that's where it comes from. And you know that sometimes how often we are spinning plates as project managers, we're context switching, and it's tiring, and it can mean that you're not doing the best bit that you'll need to do on there. So turning all, except for critical items, and accept the fact that sometimes we'll get it wrong. But then if there's again, it's like the email. If there's a morass of notifications that's on your phone that are pinging, and there's one from your boss, and you don't see it, but actually the reason he's pinging you is because you're looking and clearing all these notifications and not getting on with the job that they desperately want you to get done, or your spouse needs to get hold of you desperately for something. And kind of, it's funny. I was listening to a podcast this morning, big podcast listener, as you can imagine.
Sure.
And there was an advert for a podcast, which was the advert was two actors from the UK, very good actors, and both of them said what it was about. The podcast was about they were watching the telly for you to tell you what to watch, so that you're not sitting there in the evening with so many choices of streaming service and channel,
sure,
and you don't know what to watch. I'm kind of sitting there going, hang on, but there's that many podcasts to choose from. Where's the podcast to tell us which podcasts to listen to? I mean, there's so much, and it's increased over the years of my career, and actually in every year it seems to be exponential on the amount of stuff coming at us. And I think there's I've been reading Atomic Habits recently. James Clear, and I'm just about to jump into a book at some point about slow productivity book. Cal, I can't remember the second name. They did deep.
Cal Newport.
Yeah, because they did deep work, and I'm very much of the case of, again, as I said, I'm a slightly distracted person, but I can be very focused.
Yeah,
I was doing a project plan on Friday. I managed to get. I was going to finish at 5 hours, 2 or 3 hours in. And I was like, whoa, you know what I mean? When you properly I felt, bang, music was on, and I was like, yeah, I'm doing that. That's okay. And, getting your Microsoft project plan, and it's quite a big one, and there's some quite complicated, there's a lot of assumptions in what I was building there. But it was one of those few times that of late that I've managed to feel like I'm just getting on and doing something.
Yeah. That's a good feeling. Are you using AI for anything to help you, whether personally or at work? I know it's certainly helping you with the podcast you're saying, with some of your notes and things like that. Anything else come to mind of how it's helping you with productivity?
So with the nature of the organization I'm in, the rollout of the AI stuff will take a little more time around security and things. So you haven't got the full gamut of Bing and all that there. Though what I have done is used Bing for things like putting together business cases, trying to pull together words for describing something, and for sort of like review management. So I was trying to describe a adaptable project manager in some notes. So I basically asked ChatGPT, say, give me a list of attributes for someone like that, and it did it. And I said, all right, now chuck it into a PowerPoint structure now. Right, now can you summarize that down into a PowerPoint? And I was using that sort of thing, and I thought, yeah, once we get in the habit of using it, once it's there at the side of our desk, it's going to be brilliant. And I think there's when you look at the book, I sit there now, and when I wrote it, so it would have been, I finished it in 22, I think I put it out. Back in, just after the pandemic.
Right.
Was it 22? No, 21. Jeez, that's right.
This is right before ChatGPT would have really hit the scene.
Yeah, it was way before that. It was a glint in the eye, that kind of capability.
Right.
And it kind of comes out about a year later or whatever, that sort of thing. And you think, wow, that's really good. It's a bit clunky at the minute. I'd used a bit of things like Otter AI where it's doing recognition and used a few things, but the exponential growth of how it's happened now and what you can and can't do, you can do repeatedly. So from generating, as we talked about, the snippets that I get on the podcast to being able to generate imagery for things, being able to, I saw something the other day. A few years ago, me and my girls, I wrote a comic little version of the Christmas 12 Days of Christmas, 12 Days of Project, and me and my two daughters recorded them, and
nice.
and eventually I put it out. I thought what I decided to do. Let's have a play with this. See what I can. Again, me learning. I'll learn how to publish a piece of music, and I was expecting Amazon to go, or all of them to just go, jog on. That's terrible. You're not like that. But actually, it didn't happen. The only thing was there was a minor typo or something. It all went out and stuff. But and that's available if we're ready for your Christmas project management parties.
Well, there you go. That's good to know. Yeah.
Family Lunch Project Ensemble. But that was quite a while ago, and I was playing with AI last year, and I didn't finish it off with some AI product that can take a song and generate a video for you. Yeah. Whilst it wasn't perfect, it generated, like, it was the 12 Days project, so it's quite repetitive. But it generated some cool stuff there. I got partway through editing it and just tweaking it a bit, but I would never have got around to getting the time to go and get a video that might talk about a work schedule. You know what I mean? Because it was just like little videos of something, of someone throwing a contract on a table or something like that. And it just would work and go along with it. And just that, mind-blowing what it can do. Mind-blowing what it can do for us as project managers, because removing some of the mundanity from the role that hopefully will be there and allow us to do the most important thing, which is communicating with people, working out what's going on, having that deep mind time to sit there and go, we've got risks, let's properly dive deep into what we can do, what are the solutions, how we can do it, rather than going, we think we've got a problem, give someone an action, chuck it on a log, we've covered our backside. Actually proactively build, because whilst we all try to do that proactiveness in different areas, I seem to see it quite a lot still. Where I've seen it, whereas as long as you've recorded the risk, you've covered yourself as a PM. I've done it, and I still do, because you kind of go, I'm covered. I said it was a risk. Rather than, did I manage it? Did I do something about it? Did I do everything I could about it? But sometimes you just don't have the time to do that. You kind of go, it's a risk. We don't think it's likely to happen. Let's put it low down. We'll deal with the ones we think are likely. And we could have more time to avoid those issues ahead of time, and then maybe some of the failure rate that you get quoted all over the place of projects would improve. I'm not quite invested in that failure rate as being a real number, but there you go.
Yeah. You know, I one of the use cases I've been enjoying is if it's a relatively large PDF, summarize this PDF, and someone had reached out about a book, and I felt like I didn't have time to read it, Nigel. And so I had a PDF of it. So I said, come up with 20 podcast interview questions based on this PDF. And you know what? I got about 10 good ones out of it. And then I went into the book where those questions are relevant. And I'm like, oh, there's actually some good stuff in this book. But instead of like 2 or 3 hours to read the book, I had a good set of questions in about an hour and a half. And so, people listening to us aren't necessarily running podcasts, but why read that entire white paper, or why read that entire summary of something if you get the headlines?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it doesn't. I think people worry about the fact it's dumbing down things, but actually, what it's doing for me is remove. It's the automation that we had in the manufacturing industry from years ago. The automation in call centers that's been going on for years. It's the automation in now the white collar jobs, the the likes of ourselves, the likes of lawyers, the likes of accountants. These guys are, it's the things that it's kind of working out where they add the value and do the add value stuff. And that's what we've got to change to. I listened to quite a few author podcasts. There's a lady called Joanna Penn, she's very much forefront of using the tooling and things like that. And it's all about you end up with an AI product that you can use as your signing board, the same as you and I might jump on a call and say, right, let's have a think about this. Can knock a few ideas around. But to be fair, you and I have got a limit on what our experiences and what our knowledge is. And these tools are able to reach further out and have maybe not as insightful, but certainly more informational based suggestions. And that's where it comes through that a lot of people are using it for. It's not to replace something, but to improve the way that you do it. And that's where I see the AI coming in. And I kind of sit there thinking, at some point I need to do a number 2 on this, on how to use AI, kind of do a second edition. And it's kind of like, but if I do that, 20 minutes after I finish end, this pace of AI is going so quickly that it will be nonsensical. So I may do something like a little addendum or something like that, just around how to use it as a principle, not specifics. Because again, I can get by the time I've finished it, any tools that I suggest to use will be gone, or they'll be different, or it'll be another version.
Yeah, and the curious side of you will be excited about that. But the it's like we've got an AI class, and it's a rare week, Nigel. I don't update it just for the very reason you say. So a lot of the lessons are more text based, not recorded videos. Because if I had to record a video for it, it would be irrelevant a week and a half later. So
Well, one of the things I did with the book as well is, I think I said it in the early years, I talk about tools that I've used. So using Outlook, using the rules. The fact that AI wasn't there, and that whatever's going to come in to the next ones with Copilot and things like that will be doing better than that. Focus time wasn't something that was around at the time that for those that don't know, Microsoft will find blocks of time in your diary and put focus time in so you can do work rather than just be in meetings. And all of these things move on. And it is more about the mindset of looking, how do you manage your emails? How do you manage your communication? How do you manage your time? How do you manage your phone interaction? How do you and whilst there are examples in there, I didn't want to go to as an instruction manual, but more of a case of, if we sit back and think about it, and it becomes perpetually actionable. Now the tools will be different, but as long as you've got some of the approach, the delegation is a great example in there. That's an approach that's been around for years, but sometimes we forget. And so some of the stuff in there were people who read it and go, yeah, I know that, duh. I did actually have one review comment, which was lovely, from a German reader that said, this is stuff that high school students should learn. Already know, I think was his intent there. Right. Which I kind of thought, well, I didn't learn that. I'm not quite sure he's quite right. But he obviously knew all of those and was applying those. But there are people out there who weren't.
Or sometimes I feel like I'll read a book and I'll say, I knew that, but I'm not doing it. So I needed the nudge to actually do it, right?
Well, you go on training courses, don't you? Time management training courses. I don't know if I can see it. Yeah, I've got back in the early 90s, I went on a time management course, which had a time management system, which was a big, thick Filofax type thing with all of the process, but very similar mindset of you've got a diary, put your work in, here's your contacts. It was the very same sort of mindset that it was educating, but a different tool. But I've been back to other training courses where they've covered a bit of things like that, and I've gone, oh, geez, I've forgotten about that. Right. I used to do that all the time, and I don't do it anymore. Yeah. And even stuff as I said earlier, the stuff I've got in the book, there are things in there that I say, only read your emails 3 times a day. And I don't. And I need to, and I keep thinking, and I think to myself, I've got the invite in my diary, and I think, oh yeah, I need to stop myself looking in between, but it's very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, but we need the reminders. And, even beyond the book, I mean, all right, so Nigel, I'm not saying you're old or I'm old, but here we've been running projects for a while. What are some things you know about leading, delivering projects? What's an example that you know now, but you didn't know when you first started?
I'm trying to think on that one. It's quite, and my hair gives away my age anyway. That's sort of like, I keep trying to call it salt and pepper, but it's more salt than pepper nowadays. So I think every time I go into a new area, I learn something.
Yeah.
Every new project, as I said, I've got quite varied projects, so quite a lot of technology I'm learning in there. There are a lot of similarities that I do see around trying to understand what we're going to do. A team member may be resistant to tell me how long they think it'll take because they're not sure about something. Going through those things, and I think it's working with the fact that ambiguity is inherent in what we do. And as a project manager, there's a little bit of control freakery about us, in that we want to go, well, and actually in our environments and in our organizations and in our communities and in our governments and societies, where people go, and the number of times you've got large projects that are delayed and they're front page news and it's annoyed and there's more money. And you know that down deep in the middle of that project, earlier on, when people are putting it together, someone's gone, here's the assumptions we're making when we're planning this.
Yeah.
And this is the ambiguity. And then the next iteration of those slides going to the next management didn't have that slide in. They just had the summary. And there's a book behind me, Tammy Watchorn's book, the Change Ninja Handbook. Tammy was a guest on my show. And the book talks about getting stuff done in spite of organizations and in spite of procedures and processes and tools, etc. And I think listening to her, interviewing her, and listening to that, it's kind of I've been a lot more flexible on that sort of thing. In the fact that I've gone into situations going, I know this is a bit crap. I know I'm not going to be able to get it done normal. I know I'm going to have to use some of my network. I'm going to have to use other people in that way. I'm going to have to use some of those relationships. I'm going to have to build some relationships. It isn't going to be, right, here's our view of what we've got to do and we've got a clear scope and we know how long it will take and we've got contingency in there. It's kind of being ready for it to be a bit messy. And the VUCA sort of thing. But project management, I think, is messy. And we try to control the mess rather than go with a flow with the mess and kind of direct it, if you know what I mean. There's about 15 analogies I've got mashed up in there. But that's the bits. It's just kind of chill out a little bit on it. it's kind of with me and kind of go, okay. And this week I had some stuff where my hackles were up on something and I was like, but breathe and go, okay. You knew this. I knew this was a potential situation that was going to happen. And I think we just got to go, let's work out where we're going, what we want to do. Sometimes it's going to go wrong. Sometimes you're not going to deliver to the date. And the agile sort of focus on delivering the business value, I think, is a great thing. And there's about 15. And that isn't always time, cost, quality. You can sit there and look at that. No, your time, cost, quality, if we deliver that, you ain't getting what you need. So therefore, let's not wed ourselves to that. And if we have to have a big argument with a big senior person to say, well, we can deliver that, but it's not what you need, then we should do that. But sometimes it's hard to do that because you're sitting there and going, but everyone expects you to hit milestones and make those dates and make that budget. And actually, the main thing is deliver that business value. Now, and it might turn around and you say, well, for that budget, we can't deliver all the scope, but the main business value is 80% delivered with what we've done. Which it seems to, a lot of things are kind of, I try to do it as if it's black and white. Other people do as well. So it's trying to be better at that, flexible, and trying to communicate it as well.
Yeah. That's so good. I feel like so much of the emphasis when I first got into it was the maybe the technical side of project management. You know, you have to know what critical path is, and you have to know this. And I don't think it was clear to me early on how much of it comes down to is implied in your AI comment of how much of it is the people side. You know, the administrative side. At the end of the day, you can figure it out, right? But it's that people. I'm not concerned that some robot's going to take over my job anytime soon, because it's the stakeholder management part that's so hard. But also makes it interesting and fun. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think, but on the multiple sides there, where you're talking to your team and convincing them that actually it's going to take less time than they thought it would. Mm-hmm. We can probably and even just say, look, can you work the weekend for me, please? Yeah. Can you get that? We're just beyond there. Can you work the weekend for me, please? Have that relationship where someone doesn't sit there and go, no, because you called me out and told my manager I was terrible, therefore I'm not going to. You've got to build those relationships. You've got to have those relationships with Task. But then on the flip side of it, go there and go, right, early up customer, I'm struggling with this. We're going to struggle to make the takes. And having that relationship to be able to go, I got it wrong. I made some assumptions. Those assumptions weren't right. Or something's come in that we didn't expect and we hadn't planned for. And being honest with people like that and building that relationship. But an AI won't do that. Right. Eventually they might.
Maybe. But
how far away? I don't know.
Yeah, right. You know, here's something. I mean, there's so many reasons why I admire you, but you don't end up being on a 19-year engagement by accident. Like you know, and you can't force it to happen. But
to be fair, I've kept moving quite quickly, so sometimes it's hard to hit a moving target, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, no, I think you're kind in saying that, but I think what is it that, and I bring this up because it's really a career question, but what is it that has allowed you to provide these opportunities? And we can say it's luck, but you've improved your luck by certain things. What is it about the way you go about it, do you think, Nigel, that has kind of helped you attain the level of success you've had?
Wow, yeah, it always.
And I know how much you love to talk about yourself, right? So I know this is not an easy question, but I'm just curious.
I think the thing with me is that I had kind of got a passion for project management. I don't know why. I don't know where it comes from. I kind of I like being, in quotes, in charge, but I like working with a group of people, being the one who's trying to get stuff done. I also love the conversations with my customers and delivering quality for them. I love helping my company make some money because it's a commercial business in the day. And I've always looked at, maybe not always, but I've tried to. And maybe that came a little bit from my two things of my seeing my dad looking like a business and wanting to be a businessman kind of thing. Seeing working for Oracle, which is very much a commercial business and very much you're owning that delivery, and then working with my latest employer where it is ownership of the project as if it's a business. And that's kind of where my mindset has tried to be. So it's not just ticking the boxes, as you say, like the kind of technical project management side of it. It's I'm running a business here, so that business is of delivering this particular value to the customer. But it's also delivering value to my organization or my business, and therefore reflecting on me as an individual that I made more money. I did it more efficiently. I did it cheaper for the customer because they had better budget. Whatever metric that is, being able to do that and owning it as your business. It's the Dragon's Den scenario when people walk in there and they ask them about their numbers and they don't know it. I have project managers who I've had to coach a number of times on what their numbers were, because it wasn't seen as important because they were doing the project delivery and managing the team and doing that. But there's so many facets to a business where you've got to the project, as a business, in my mind, is you've got the actual delivery itself, which is one part of it. You've got the people. So the people you've got on your project, you want them to be better when they left your project than worse. You don't want them to be in bits and a shell of their former selves because you've just wrung them out. But you want them to have learned something and enjoyed it as well, but felt some sort of feeling of achievement. You want to have generated income for your business. The business that we're in, we'll work for companies, whether it's my business, whether it's, I want to generate that income in there. And kind of those are kind of two, three of the pillars. And then obviously there's the next bit is the next piece of work. Is it working with that customer so that they're confident with me that the next piece of work is who they want to give it to me? Yeah. And again, a lot of those are, that delivery bit is getting stuff done, but those other bits are a lot of it's a relationship. Now the finances is a bit technical, but again, understanding how influence it. So I think my approach to it being my business and taking ownership of what I had is been the thing that people do recognize, and maybe to my detriment at times.
Well, I wonder, I'm interviewing somebody this afternoon. It's a book on presentation skills, but she says an interesting thing, and I think it applies to you. She goes, everything comes down to likability. And now some of it could be work too hard to be liked, and then they don't stay focused and take ownership and things like that. So it's maybe a bit of a spectrum, but you're a likable guy. And I think when you said, and you don't have to agree with me or disagree, but and maybe your daughters wouldn't agree, I don't know. But the thing is that if somebody's like, hey, I want Nigel to run this because I know how he'll go about the people side. I know he'll take ownership. So it's not just likability, but I think maybe project managers need to be reminded of that. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're right. I don't know. You do have it in the States, I know, in the UK version of The Apprentice.
Right.
And the thing that it obviously sets probably every real project manager sets their teeth on edge is as that person says, you're the project manager and you're the project manager. And it's kind of like, no, they're not. They haven't got a Gantt chart. And then somewhere in the session, I'm the project manager. Yeah. Therefore, you shall do as I say.
Right.
And it's kind of like, that's not the way round. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For me, if we've got a situation where you're going to make a decision, you go, oh, look, it's my fault if it's wrong, but I'm going to make this decision, is what you say. It's not because I'm the manager. It's because someone said to me, it's your fault if this goes right, Nige. It's your fault if this goes wrong. Run it for us. Right. I'll take the hit on it. Now, telling your team that it's my fault if it goes wrong, I've made that decision. The team, from my experience, my teams prefer you to be decisive than indecisive, and accepting of that position of it's yours. Now, I may go too far the other way at times, where I accept responsibility where I should be maybe kicking someone. But again, I kind of have that mindset of people are doing stuff that with good intentions. 95, 98% of people are doing stuff with good intentions. No one's doing something to put a piece of code live that doesn't work and break something. The customer's not being pushy because of, everyone's generally, we've got to work. We don't want a hard life at work. No one, but there are a few that love that conflict, love that. And again, those characters, the conflict, some people appear to have that conflict, but actually it's not about them liking conflict. It's about the fact that conflict is not a problem for them. They just deal with it. And that, again, one of the things I had Liz Hobbs on my show talking about the DISC profiles, and Manage Tool guys talk about that. For me, understanding why someone thinks I'm an idiot and why I think they're an idiot. So I had to work out the language to change that.
Well done.
and that's how the DISC books work. And I think there's a book called Surrounded by Idiots, which I think based on that as well. It's fundamentally, it's because we have different behavioural characters. And the way that I communicate to that one person compared to how they communicate to me. And I tell a story, I had a guy who worked for me. He was a very, what they call a high C, very detailed orientated architecture person. He's brilliant, absolute genius, yeah? Superb, got all manner of degrees and stuff. Way better at stuff than me. Much better at what we were doing than me. And he sent me something on email saying, right, Nigel, can you approve this? Here's all the details, lots of information, backup detail, loads of stuff. 15 seconds later, I've approved it. And he came over to my desk saying, you haven't read that? And I went, no, I haven't. But how can you approve it? You haven't read it. And I'm like, you're better than me. You're much more focused on what's going on there. If I spot something, that's luck. Yeah, and I'm not going to add any value. All I'm going to do is ask stupid questions. That it's just, it wasn't going to be it. And I trusted him implicitly, and I was willing to accept the fact that actually, if that turned out to be wrong, well, no one would have caught it, is my opinion in that particular thing. But he really struggled with seeing how I could do that without make a decision, without having all of that information behind there in my head and being able to have ratified it. But we were quite good because he would hold me back from being the wild cowboy that I could be sometimes. And I would drag him forward a little bit to be a bit more. So we had a really good relationship. That could have been a negative relationship in that we could have not got on. But and that's the whole point of understanding where my strengths in my behaviour become a weakness, and can see that in other people's eyes when they're looking at me and realise, actually, I can see why they were annoyed and irritated. And then the thing that could cause that, the only person you can change is you. So wishing that everyone else was like me, having fun, it's great.
It's a fool's game.
There's much done.
Right.
But I can change me when I'm dealing with someone who needs that detail. I can give them the detail and proactively help them make the decision. When I need someone when you have someone who doesn't want to care about the people and they just want to get it done, I can be direct. I can not say, hi, how are you? How's it going? How's the family? I can just say, right, it's a transactional thing. Let's get it done. Bang, bang, bang. So I think that I've learned, goes back to the previous question earlier, was when I discovered that, and I discovered it a long time ago, but didn't apply it very well, it makes life a lot easier. Again, you forget it sometimes and you have clashes with people and you just throw a pen across the room because you've had a frustrating conversation, but eventually you can get back into it.
Well, man, I could talk to you all day, Nigel. I'm just curious, before we close, would you tell people about the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast?
Yeah. So the podcast came out back, I don't know how really. what I'll do, I'm going to go back and blame Peter Taylor.
Okay.
I'll blame Peter. And Peter wrote the book, The Lazy Project Manager. I kind of read that and kind of thought, oh, I'd like to do something like that. I'd like to. But I came up with a concept, and the concept was the Sunday Lunch Project Manager. The Sunday Lunch Project Manager is a book I have yet to write. I have the concept. I will write it. It's a parable. And then, so that kind of got me into writing. And then I wrote a couple of project management books for fun, really. One of them is called Project Manager, When I Were a Project Manager, which is a reworking of the Four Yorkshiremen sketch for project managers at the end of their careers chatting, which for a giggle, it's tiny, 99p these days. I think it might even be free on some stuff. And then I did another one, which is called Project Management Sketches. And at that point, it was like, how am I going to get people to know about these things? And I thought, I know, I'll do a podcast. So what it started off as, because I've been listening to yours, I've been listening to Cornelius's, I was listening to, anyway, I thought, I'll do that. And this is 2017-ish, 17, 18. And I started doing that. And really what it was, the content for the listener was really, really high quality, in that it was me shouting, buy my book into the internet, basically. That was it.
What could go wrong?
Please buy my book. A little bit of background of what I was doing and little thoughts and stuff. And it developed. And then there was a few things that went on. And towards 2018, I decided I need to add some value to this. If I'm going to go for this, I need to do something. And I asked Peter if he'd come on the show. It's the basic thing. And we chatted about it. And then I got a bit of confidence and I got a few people. I was doing it monthly. And initially it started as being a kind of in-depth background conversation. I got a list of questions how people got there. And there's some really interesting background conversations from people who, when I asked them the one question of what did you want to be when you grow up, back to what we were talking about before, they said safe, because they grew up in a war zone. And you kind of sit there and,
wow.
And so things, and it evolved, and I had wonderful people on the show like you and loads of other people on there. And eventually I started getting non-interview ones where we talk about topics. And what I try to do is make it as conversational as possible. It's a chat about someone's book maybe, or someone's, quite often books these days. And it's generally stuff that is related to project management, to our general job as a manager. It's not how to do a Gantt chart. It's not how to do, and because there's podcasts out there that are brilliant and better than me at doing that. And it's really about chatting to individuals and thinking about how we can improve as a project manager or manager in general. I am going to try and get back to a few more of the in-depth interviews, because I've missed doing those. And it's now weekly, and it's kind of one show split over 2 weeks. And I essentially get, say, 25, 30 podcast, 1 hour free consultancies from people trying to shift the book, that I can ask all the questions I want to ask to try and improve myself, and I can let listeners listen to it as well. So that's how I see it. I try to be that person who's being cheeky and getting free consultancy.
I could totally relate, for sure. I feel like I have no need to try to come up with new ideas. Right? There's so many good ideas out there from the guests, and I think today gave you a little bit of a taste what people would get. Just a charming person, curious, willing to have an informal but interesting discussion. And for those listening, if you'd like to learn more about Nigel, his books, his Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast, I put links in the show notes for this cast. So, Nigel, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Thanks, Andy. It's been an absolute pleasure.